The CXPod is brought to you by Netigate. Netigate helps you put your customers at the center of your business. Check them out at netigate.net.
Welcome to the CXPod, where we aim to expand people's perception of customer experience management. We know that customer experience goes hand in hand with employee experience, and we believe that a broader and more holistic view might even replace terms like CX and EX with people experience or human experience.
Hey, and welcome to the CXPod once again. This is Merete speaking, and Joanna's here with me. Hello, Joanna.
Hello, Merete. Hello to all of our listeners. Wonderful to be here again. And hello to our guest today. We have Lavrans with us here today from PwC. Did I say it in the right way now as we're talking in English, Lavrans?
Actually, I think it's PwC.
PwC, of course it is.
I love how our English host is the one asking questions about how to pronounce or say English words.
But you're not the first one to be confused.
No, that's good. So
I happen
apologies.
to know. Yeah, the only reason I knew it was because my ex-partner used to work for PwC, so I sort of got it in that way. But yes, Lavrans Løvlie, I like to refer to you as the father of service design. No pressure on that, but that's sort of what you've always been in my opinion, and this is also sort of the background story for how I got to know you, because you guys came in before you were part of PwC, but I'm going to let you tell the story. But you were Live, which is a huge thing, so we'll probably get back to that. But you guys came in and helped us when I worked in Telia to get the focus on the customer centricity, and I have to say, from all my 20 years of experience working with customer experience, I think working with you guys, and I have to mention, Astrid, Anders, and the crew that came to tell you, I think that's where I learned that this can actually be something that we do as a profession. It's not just a passion or a soft value, or it could be a strategy, and it actually has an effect. And I learned so much from you guys. So no need to say, I'm really, really thrilled and stoked to have you here on the show today, and really excited to hear your take on our question challenge. So welcome, warmest welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Merete. And I have to say the learning was mutual from our work too.
Oh, really? That's nice.
Yeah, it's amazing. I still look at it today, 7, 8, 9 years later, and there's some pretty good stuff in there.
I think it's actually 10.
10.
Yeah. How time flies.
Yeah. Or 9 at least, but yeah. But that's so cool to hear as well, because we had a lot of fun too. And I remember, because as everyone knows, I like to talk a lot. And Anders, who still is with PwC and on the team, I know, he could transform all my words into beautiful drawings, and it just made sense, So it's service design. We're going to dive hopefully more into that when we ask you the first question, Lavrans, which is, tell us about yourself. Who are you? And please fill in also a little bit about Livework and the story, and how you ended up in PwC eventually, and where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. I trained originally as an industrial designer, and I did that in America at Rhode Island School of Design. I wanted to design cool things, and I graduated the spring of '94, which is the spring when the internet came.
Yeah.
In terms of that's when Netscape, the first browser, came out, and I thought that this thing surely must need some design as well. I was back in Norway, and I found some guys up in the research park that had started the first Norwegian multimedia company, which later was the first web consulting company in Norway. I got really into what we today call UX design. Then I did my master's degree in London at the Royal College of Art. I believe have at least one of the first master's degrees in what we today would call UX, which I thought was called computer-related design.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a year after that, we set up Livework, set up with Ben Reason and Chris Downs in London. And it was fundamentally the thinking that from a design point of view, the design professions were in silos, but customers weren't.
Exactly.
You had the graphic design to communication, you had the web design to the website, products, etc. And we kind of thought, well, you have to flip it and think about the journey, and surely you should be able to design a service in the same way as you design a product or a website. So we thought that this must be called service design. We checked out the competition, and we couldn't find any. So that's when we thought, either this is a really stupid idea, because someone must surely have tried and failed, or it's such a banal idea that it's just brilliant. So we went for it. And took us 2 years before we got the first phone call when someone asked for some service design to be done. Like, yes, someone called actually for our value proposition.
Yeah.
So it took about 2 years, but we were very methodical and structured in terms of being conscious about building a discipline. So we worked very closely with other design companies. We worked with academic institutions. We made sure to align the language and the terms we were using, etc. And my partner Ben last year, he did the check on LinkedIn and found about 200,000 people that call themselves a service designer. So we're like, at least that's one thing it's the only thing we managed to scale, to be honest.
But also, I mean, you've written books about this as well, though. I mean, so you've written the book Service Design, and then there's Service Design for Business. And I'm not sure I understand the difference because I've only read the first, but
Yeah. So we published one book with Rosenfeld in the States, great publisher, which was kind of it's a book for designers. We're thinking for students or people who want to become or work with services, or so it's for designers. But then we thought we'd write one for our clients as well. So that's Service Design for Business. So if you don't want to do it, but you have a business task you need to solve, how can then service design be useful to you?
Yeah. Like it's the same methodology. Am I correct in saying that, Lavrans? It's like taking you through the service design principles, but more to solve a business case or
I think the difference is the first book is how to do it.
Okay.
The second book is how to use someone who can do it for you.
Okay.
Yeah. So how to utilize the profession, sort of, and what it can do, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I think that's also, if you don't know what service design is, then why would you want to hire a service designer if you don't know what it can do for you?
So it's pretty cool book in its own sense. And then I'm just babbling away, but I'll try to get to the end of the story.
That's fine. That's fine.
In 2018, Livework in Oslo, we'd worked a lot with PwC. And the reason was quite simple. We had a client and we delivered a new service concept, and they thought it was brilliant. And they asked us, but can you give us the numbers? Oh, we are designers. Of course, we can't give you the numbers. And they said, well, we know someone who can.
Yeah.
PwC in, which started a wonderful relationship. So we started working together more and more. And in the last year of Livework in Oslo, I think 1/3 of our turnover went to PwC as a subcontractor.
Yeah.
Because, of course, combining the design and experience work with good financial thinking makes a lot of sense. And personally, I felt that service design as a field started to plateau a bit. It wasn't that radical development of thinking that happened from 2000 to 2015. And I thought we need to challenge ourselves and expose ourselves to more complex challenges. And I thought the way to do that was to place us in a very broad consulting group, which is what PwC is. So we brought Livework Oslo in. Livework still lives its life very happily in London and Sao Paulo and Rotterdam. And I spoke to them yesterday.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So I'm dying to ask this question, Lavrans, and it's not part of the challenge, but and this is, the way I know you and the guys from my time in Telia when we worked together is you're not consultants at all by the look of it, right? So where normal consultants come in with suits and ties and white shirts or blue shirts, and it's a white collar. Yeah, slight change, but then again, we met at the Journey Ops event a few weeks back, and this guy is standing in front of me, and he's the least sort of consultant looking guy in the room. But then here you are working for one of the biggest consultancy companies in the world, I would say. So how was that transfer? And I know, Joanna, I'm sorry, I didn't even prepare you for this, but I need to hear how has it gone implementing the culture of, low key, sort of laid back, really, really clever, smart, and competent designers. But it must have been a cultural crash, or wasn't it? I don't know. I'm asking the question.
Do you want to jump down this hole?
Yes.
Okay. So a lot of people ask me when we did it. First of all, kind of all my cool designer friends was like, sell out, and then my normal friends who don't know about this designers are like, okay, now we understand what you do. So that was fun. Oh, a real job.
Yeah. Lavrans grew up.
And the first question from all the designers was like, how are you going to maintain your culture?
Yeah, I can imagine.
It really provoked me. Okay, when you ask that question, what do you mean about our culture? What do you mean when you say that? And which bits of it do you think are important to protect and guard, and which bits do you think should go? Because I certainly think some of the bits of the very designy culture should go. So I that was quite provoked by all the designers kind of naturally thinking that any design community would have a better, stronger culture than any other type of community.
Yeah.
It is a bit prejudice, right?
Exactly. And that's the first thing that needs to go. That arrogance that empathic arrogance that designers often come with. Like, we're so empathic, we're so understanding, but we're the only ones who get it.
And I just fell straight into it, right? But it's interesting, and I think also this is what I love about you, Lavrans, because you can say these things and no one takes offense because it makes such sense, right? And you're totally right. So how did they take it then when you were provoked?
No, I'm a nice guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it'll work itself out, I said.
Yeah.
I guess it's a natural bias. And I think, for us, it's also understanding that it's natural and being empathetic to, you have an automatic bias to something you don't know more about.
So true.
So you sort of think that the designer world should be in this box as it is, as we know it. It's safest to think of it as that way. But thinking of putting this principle into a different kind of business consulting area or business that would damage, I think it's just insecurity. And as long as we know that and understand that, it helps us to tackle and navigate the.
I think that the fundamental, the reason why it's a shift is like the question is what's important, and it's not important what I am. Am I a designer or a consultant or a nurse or a teacher? The point is what kind of meaningful change are we able to deliver to the world around us and to the clients we work with. So if that's the question, how can we deliver positive change with the things we're good at? Then my answer was it won't be easy, but I think we can make a bigger difference if we work in a big, broad consulting kind of culture.
Yeah,
It's got price and it's got some benefits to do that.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a great
And
perspective.
yeah. And I think it also brings us great to our next question, which is really diving into the field of customer experience, because we've taken a road down your background, Lavrans. We understand that you come from the service design, you've gone into PwC, and now we're talking about customer experience. So how would you define customer experience from your perspective, in your own words? I'm really intrigued to hear your take on this.
I think it's a really interesting question, because I will talk about it from a service designer's point of view. And I think there's a much longer tradition than design, which is more marketing, comes from marketing tradition, much more analytically driven than my tradition, which is more creatively driven, etc. So I describe it as a service designer, and I think customer experience is the relationship customers have with an institution. So my relationship with a bank, or my relationship with the tax authorities, or my relationship to a brand or a service. So at least that's the way I looked at it. And I think there's a big difference between user experience, which is my relationship to a product,
Yes.
and customer experience, which is my relationship to the institution. And this is where a service design perspective is useful, because we think in terms of life cycles and journeys. And whenever people discuss the word experience, it can become elusive and weird. But it just struck me the other day that we have a language to discuss experience, which is quite tangible as service designers, because we have the before and the during and the after. And we can talk about situations. What happened before? What happens after? What kind of experience can we provide a basis for? Where do things go wrong, etc.? So in that sense, CX is the customer journey, or the customer life cycle, or possibly more precisely, as a service designer, we use the tools around life cycles and journeys to understand and communicate and discuss customer experience. And I think that complements, other approaches like the more marketing analytic driven. It's really interesting when you look at it compared to user experience and UX and product design, where I think, again, it's the journey and the bits of the journey. So was that a good answer to what is customer experience?
Yeah, I think it is a very good answer, because you went directly to what it is really for the customer. It's the relationship that they have with the organization. And I think Lavrans, one of the things we sometimes hear is the confusion between customer experience management or customer experience, and the approach that you mentioned here from service design perspective. It's very practical. It's very, I think this is the nice thing for companies to sort of be able to grasp, is that this is, if we think about that, they always have a customer journey or a life cycle. They would always go through a life cycle, and they will always have small customer journeys. The question, of course, is up to us as a company, is how we manage that. And this is where the service design element comes in, because we need to manage it on different layers. We need to manage it on the interaction point, but then we also need to manage it on the behind the scenes layer. Okay, how is our service or application architecture to deliver this experience?
Yeah. And I think, I'm realizing also, like I said, professionalizing my role in CX was happening throughout the collaboration with you guys. So I'm realizing right now, this moment, that a lot of the ways I talk and the expressions I use when talking about these things, I've actually sort of learned from you guys. And I love, because what you're describing, Joanna, is basically the outside in perspective, right? Which is, I think that's one of the sort of holy grails in service design. And also, there's one thing I want to point out, that when we ask our guests what is customer experience to you, or what's the definition, we keep talking about all the interactions we have with the customers. But what I love about what you say, Lavrans, is before, during, and after. It's also all the memories. It's all the sort of emotional footprints that a brand or an institution, like you call it, will leave it, whether you come back or not. And I think maybe that's not where we should put the biggest effort, but I think it's definitely a huge part of how to maintain sort of what you spend all your money on in marketing. You need to take into consideration that there's an after. So I think that's a great way to respond to the question. And I'm excited about the next one as well, because we talked a little bit about this before we went on and started the recording. So again, I might provoke you, or you may provoke us, but that's the exciting part about having different guests with different points of view. And since you're such a nice guy, I believe we're going to be having fun at least anyway. But I'm just going to ask the question and give the word to you, because I think that's the best way to do it. So who do you believe should own responsibility for customer experience?
When you brought up that question, I really started thinking, I've been asked these questions a lot of times. But then I struggled a little bit to understand why it was an important question. And then I realized that I think the only people who's asked me that are CX people. I've never been asked by a client, who do you think in our companies should own CX?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it's something that people like us are interested in, because we're trying to figure out who do we need to talk to. And that's an interesting question, because the more we look into this when it comes to CX, but even marketing, it's not always easy to find out who's responsible for the things, for a holistic view of what hits customers and users in the end. Yeah.
So I just want to add, and we've been talking so much about mandate, and it's one of my least favorite words, but I think the question also arises from the sort of the desperate need to figure out what should the mandate be and who should have it, because depending on who you give it to, that's where the outcome, sort of the potential outcome is. If you give the mandate to a C-suite, then you believe that that would be effectful, right? But then that's not enough. So you try to give it to someone on the floor who has a manager title or operational line of work, but then it doesn't work like that either. So I think it's a desperate need to sort of place, tag it or but yeah, maybe it's not that interesting.
Who can we work with in this?
Yeah.
But I have to confess, I've asked some people myself.
Good.
I asked the previous CEO of Gjensidige Forsikring insurance company, Helge Leiro Båstad, and they are really good in terms of customer experience. And he said, obviously I'm the CEO, that's my responsibility, because a high awareness of the customer experience is simply an essential component of any well-run business.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very cool. An example of where it worked, but of course, he's someone who had a passion and skill connected to it.
Yeah.
So,
and do you think if he didn't have the passion, would it have worked as well, right? So that's one good example of where it worked, putting the responsibility with the CEO.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
I'm just thinking, sorry, go on, Lavrans.
It also kind of depends how far you break it down. If you think about KPIs, so customer satisfaction, usually that will be owned by a divisional director of something.
Yeah.
So there is a customer KPI that they all have. I think it's one that they own together with financial KPIs and probably some employee KPIs, etc. So I think it looks like it usually sits with someone who owns a suite of products or services or a particular market segment. But I think your question was who should own it.
Yeah. Yes,
What do you
yes,
think?
I think that's what I'm sort of reflecting. I'm thinking, okay, well, why did we put that question on our question challenge? I've started trying to turn it around and think, okay, well, what do we class as needing? What are the jobs to be done related to customer experience management? Then once we've classified the jobs to be done, then we can start going, okay, well, who needs to ensure that these jobs to be done are in fact done so that we can deliver a holistic, consistent customer experience? I know that I will always fall back with somebody needs to have the whether it's called the mandate, but the accountability of ensuring that actions are actually partaken across the entire organization. And that's because I truly see customer experience as a holistic, business critical activity that needs to be taken throughout the entire organization. Very much like we've talked about in some episodes, having an operating model. We need to work in different pillars, whether it's from having a clear direction to understanding our customers, to ensuring that we have a culture that is customer centric, to ensure that we're managing the customer journey and the customer life cycle, to ensure that we are improving our channels and application and system architecture, and designing, of course. And from my perspective, it would be, I can't see that we can delegate that to many different roles without having somebody who is ensuring accountability, that we are working aligned across all these pillars. But yeah, we really aren't. We haven't really found a single great concrete answer.
Can I try to ask you a question?
Yeah,
Let's see if this
please
changes.
Turning the
Who do you
tables.
believe should own responsibility for customer satisfaction?
So
Does that change it?
say again, what change?
Who should own responsibility for our customer satisfaction? Does that change the question?
It does. And I was just thinking the same. Are we asking who is responsible for CX, or are we asking who's responsible for CXM, customer experience management?
Yeah.
And I think it just sort of dawned on me, and this is a little bit embarrassing because it should have ages ago. And I think it's not new thoughts, it's just a new way of putting it. But I've just been writing on my notes here that, the CEO needs to own the strategy and make sure that, if you want to have a customer-centric strategy, that's the CEO's responsibility to ensure that the strategy lives in the culture, right? So this CHRO is responsible to ensure that the people understand that this is a culture that's desirable. And then you have the COO who needs to sort of enable the operations to be able to deliver on KPIs that measure if customers are having good or bad experiences, including customer satisfaction, which is also a big responsibility of the customer service, probably director or manager, and then they have the customer experience manager/managers running around ensuring that we're all looking at the same holistic picture. So sort of enabling all these people again to do what their responsibility is. And then we're back to the jobs to be done. And then, taking it further out in the hierarchy, all the employees need to understand from HR that this is part of our culture, but it has also to be sort of taught and, walking the walk and talking the talk and all of that. So it sort of dawned on me that it's layers. It's not really a responsibility question. It's more about how to ensure that it's alive. But I'll also say, like I've said so many times before, I would rather have a customer-centric chief operating officer than a chief customer experience officer with a very narrow mandate in a very narrow silo. So, but yeah, that's when you ask the question back, Lavrans, and I think it was just dawning on me at the same moment, like, are we asking customer experience, or are we asking the customer experience management part of it, or how to, because it's two quite different things. Yeah. So right back us, Joanna. We are getting the tables turned again and again this season.
Yeah.
It's on this question as well. I think when I've seen those roles, they're typically someone with a lot of influence and little power.
Yes.
So they run around and talk to a lot of people, and people listen to them, and they're highly regarded, but they don't have a strong mandate. And that might just be fine.
Yeah. I think
Yes.
not being given a
I'm with you on
mandate
that.
is a great opportunity to take it. Yeah. And like we've always said, like, this is the way I operate now. As a, sometimes in my role, like my role is all over the place right now because of a lot of things. But as long as I'm not being given a specific mandate, I'm just going to do what I believe is right. And then until somebody takes the mandate from me, you know what I say? Like I'm just sort of, I'm assuming that I have the mandate. And I think that's something that every customer experience professional or practitioner, like if you're not given a mandate, then pretend you have all the mandate you need. It may sound silly, but I think it is a nice way to approach it. Because then at least if somebody stops you, then you'll know, okay, then maybe the whole customer centricity thing wasn't so important, and you can sort of, then you can sort of confront that.
Yeah.
But I was interrupting you, Lavrans.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. And now I want to interrupt you because I was just rolling off from the influence. I think that's a really nice a nice way to reflect over it, because I think the most important thing we do is influence in a positive direction. And if we're doing that, then we are ensuring that slowly but surely over the entire organization, we are taking more customer-centric perspectives in the actions that we are doing. And that is really the goal if you are a customer experience manager. So if you're lacking the power, but you have the power to influence, then that is quite cool.
At least there's one logic there. Say the responsibility for customer satisfaction, you should and usually lies with a CXO. And they're responsible for customer satisfaction, for business performance, and for their staff, their employees. And they have that responsibility. And then to have someone who can jump and talk to all of them, influence all of them, and maybe plant the same ideas and the same approach with the people who actually own it. It's not a crazy approach.
No. I like it. So we did manage to answer it, sort of. Yes, even if it was a little bit of a. That's fun.
Cool.
So,
Joanna, we like that.
Yeah, and I love it when people turn the table on us, when we get to be challenged as well, because
this was interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Should we jump into the next question? Because Lavrans, we're intrigued to find out what you think is what is capturing your attention most today in the customer-centric business world.
Reflecting on that question, I'm really positive. People love to complain about customer experiences and blah blah blah. But when I think 5 years back, 10 years back, 15 years back, the services that we use in our daily lives are so much more customer and user friendly than what they were. And we just forget it because we get used to how easy it is. As long as you're not an old person who's forced to use apps for everything, and cognitively you're starting to struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
But I have to say that I think there's been a huge positive development, for the last 25 years. I think customer orientation is much more of a given in any business.
Yeah.
Of course, it's important. And people sometimes get offended when I say I'm kind of a customer experience expert. And they said, but I work in this business. That's my job, to be customer oriented.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to hear that, And I think there are all these things like customer journeys. When we worked with that 10 years ago, it was still a relatively novel approach, at least in a systematic way. But now, everyone knows what the customer journey is and how to work with it, and you don't need particular training or education. So a lot of these customer-centric tools and ways to work, design thinking. Who hasn't done a 1, 2, 3, or 5-day course in design thinking, or a month or something? People like me can
I love it.
complain, they don't know the depth of it. But on the other hand, it's brought a lot of these things that were specialist skills into the everyday behavior and everyday skill set of many companies. So it's a lot of good things are happening.
Yeah.
And also, back when we started working and started Livework, kind of had to go to consultancy to buy customer centricity. Now, I think to a much larger degree, this is institutionalized internally in business. You have solid teams of people who are professional customer experience people in some kind of way. So I think it's gone kind of from an expert domain to common knowledge, which is positive.
Yeah. But at the
I
same
love
time,
that reflection.
yeah, but I need to challenge it a little bit. Because I think, Lavrans, that this is correct in the geography that you sort of work and live in and exist in. Taking into consideration what's your profession and what you do and who you work with. Because obviously the companies who've reached out to PwC and former Livework to get good at this, they are ahead. And this is a gap that we see quite often. And also on the podcast, we've sort of noticed that, yes, we do have some great examples. And I totally agree. We have so many services now, cars for hire. You can just go on the street. There's a kick bike, an electric bike for you, or you can Vips or Swish or what you call it, like mobile pay. You can pay stuff on your phone. Like the phone has been so centralized in our everyday life, and we get so many jobs to be done. But at the same time, the experience of that, a lot of research tells us that customers are still unhappy and maybe as unhappy as they've ever been. And I think there's two reasons for that. One is that the ones who are good are great, but then the ones who are lagging aren't moving the needle in any sort of way. And then there's actually three things. The second is what you talked about. You raise the experience level, and then the expectations shoot, and then so you can never really get a great customer experience because we're always going to demand more. And the third thing is, and that's the human touch. And you're sort of touching upon it when you mentioned the old people who cannot use these great services, but it's also a lot of other people. And this is when I can get going with diversity and inclusion. And I'm not going to drop into that hole, but we keep forgetting that it's not, these services can't be applied to all and to fix the problem. It's not everyone's job to be done that we're fixing. We're fixing the job to be done for some people, but not everyone. And some people will have the need to keep calling the customer service and talk to a human being and not a chatbot. And I think that's where it's getting polarized is the word I want to use, even if it's in the wrong sort of sense. But we're so good on this side. Let me see where the camera is. And we're so bad on this side. And so you can have great experiences, but we also have horrible experiences still. And I want to fill that gap. But so I agree with you, but I also disagree. And this was my rant for today. Here you go. Now you sort of triggered me.
And now I'm going to try and align you both. But I agree with both of you, because I agree with you, Lavrans, that we have seen a huge change. And as you mentioned with service design, when I first started out talking about customer experience on LinkedIn, and there was nobody talking about customer experience. And we were still, when we were developing this within our bureau, okay, how should we communicate it? We were, and still do, talk about, okay, what is the right terminology to use? But we noticed that, and that is why I'm also positive with you, we noticed that this is starting to really be planted or ingrained in very many people's consciousness, ways of working, methodologies are slowly being brought out. So it's hugely positive. And then we also have the gaps, as you're saying, Merete, is that
and the
some people are some people are succeeding, some people are saying they're doing it, but they're not putting in the actual, so to say, legwork and muscle work in rigging their organizations to deliver great experiences. So there are gaps, but that is also it's a natural progression, but and they will follow after. Let's hope that and if they don't, they deserve to not
Die.
follow after.
Yeah.
I
And we're
I
not going to be out of jobs, right?
No.
I'm so tempted to go into your rabbit hole about inclusion, Merete.
Yeah.
I won't, but let's just acknowledge that services work pretty well for white, male, educated men in their 50s that live in a semi-detached house in the suburb of Oslo.
We can agree on that. And it's a good start, you know, but it's just not.
And I have a more serious a way to try to close the question on what captures my attention in the customer-centric world. I think if we think 2010, around that, customer experience was what we all talked about and fit very well with what we did as service designers. Then around 2015, the world started focusing on the user experience because everyone realized that Facebook and Google, they never talked about customers. They only talked about users. So they're like, what do we need customers for if we just design things well enough for our users? And then I think since then, with the agile world and the whole product team approach, digital product teams, we've gone in enormously in a user experience way. And I think the customer experience has been forgotten.
Yeah.
I think it's led
Now you're
to
talking.
a lot of great user experiences, apps that actually work and etc.
Absolutely.
But the way companies then organize their customer centricity is around products, which is actually that's 80s way of thinking. It's a very industrial way of thinking. It's a way of thinking. Efficient production is the way to approach it. So what I'm thinking is going to happen is that organizations have changed the matrix into agile organizations, UX focus, and we're starting to see how that's creating new silos.
Yeah.
Oh, the sign-in process is amazing, but I just can't buy anything. No, that's because that's a different product team, and they aren't. So I kind of think there might be a renaissance of CX. Give it a year or two, and we're kind of some of the negative effects of digital product orientation are going to show themselves even clearer. I think maybe someone who can sit there and work with the whole journey systematically and manage an experience as a relationship to the institution rather than the use of a product. I think there's a need for it at least.
Yeah, and I think this takes us to, I'm going to jump. I mean, we knew that we probably wouldn't make all questions today, and we won't. That's established already, but I'm going to make a jump. But before I do, I want to sort of look back at one of our guests that we had in a previous season, Hege Maria Brown, who was talking about relational experience, right? And how one of the things amongst many clever things that she says, but she talks about how a relationship is not going to be working with only one part doing all the work. So if you as the company is, you're providing the best services or products or whatever it is, but it's not going to be a relationship until the other party actually interacts back. So, and I think a crucial part of being able to do that is talking to, if it's the users or the customers or the clients or the patients, whoever is on the other end of that institution, as you so nicely put it earlier, Lavrans. This brings me to the question about voice of the customer management and voice of the customer programs. And I also have to mention, just because, we are the proud sponsorees of a company called Netigate. They sponsor us for this podcast, and they do deliver voice of the customer and employee experience platforms that enables their customers again to ask questions and get the feedback into the organization so that you can either act on it, but at least understand how it is that you're doing. So just a little shout out to Netigate. And now I want to give you the opportunity to answer the question, because in all of this, in the service design, how big of a deal is it to have a voice of the customer program, and what's your take on them 2024?
I think as a designer, you have to go out and observe and listen. It's difficult to be creative if you don't do it. It's not systematic voice of the customer work. My only comment on this is I think it's going to be incredibly interesting to see how this develops over the next couple of years with artificial intelligence. So given now that in the last 12 months, big call centers, most of them have gone to automatic voice to text. So you have enormous amounts of verbal customer data that can be analyzed at volumes.
Yes.
I mean, we're not talking about people clicking, how did you like us 1 to 5?
Yeah.
It's all the conversations that the institution has with customers where they need help, because that's why they're calling, because there's some other bit that hasn't quite worked. And with the ability also to automatically really starting to pinpoint where's the root cause of this issue.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 7 steps back in the journey right here.
Yeah. And much quicker.
Yeah. So I'm very curious to see how this whole listening to customers, the methods and the techniques and technologies, I'm sure is going to change quite dramatically in the next couple of years.
And I can't imagine how much money companies have sort of spent trying to fix the symptoms and not the root cause, because we haven't really been good enough, neither methodology-wise or sort of product-wise to understand, fully what the customer think and feel. Because also, and we've talked about this many times, emotions are such a big factor in this. So you may even say something in a survey, but then you go ahead and you do something totally opposite. But now with the technology, like you mentioned, we have the opportunity to go straight to the root cause. And I think that's going to be a big factor in improving customer experience and not just user experience, as we've sort of stated. So, and I also think, there's a potential, I think we can agree, but let's see how we manage that potential and govern it, because we could go wrong too, right?
Or maybe the answer is always the same, so there's no uniqueness left.
Yeah, who knows?
Yes, yeah. Exciting field to wait and see and watch what happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think what we can say is, one way or another, even if it's, either it's a standard survey way or, interviewing people, we've talked about, qualitative versus quantitative data, but I think it's crucial that we still listen to our customers one way or another. So voice of the customer programs are here to stay. We just don't know exactly what they will look like going forward.
Yeah.
Netigate could probably tell us more about that. We'll make sure to do a show about that once.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have time for one more question?
We do. We should have time for 5 more, but unfortunately, we're going to have to start wrapping up. So depending on how 1 or 2, depending on how efficient we are, I know it's hard.
Okay. Let's jump into a next question. I would love to know, Lavrans, your take on employee experience. So what would you say that what is the role of employee experience and company culture when it comes to delivering a good customer experience?
I think it's crucial. Well, it's like everyone's probably answered the questions about, what does it take to become good? Customer centricity needs to lie so deep in your culture. So it needs to be kind of what you talk about and what you're interested in, etc. And the funny thing, most people that work in a business or in the public service, they're really interested in their customers. They really like to talk about them, and they really like to talk about when things work well, etc. So it is easy to activate people and share and create a shared community around the issue of customers and customer satisfaction and etc. So how important is it? I'm sure you can have a great culture that isn't customer-centric, but I think it's cultures that are customer-centric, they have more interesting things to create a culture around.
Yeah. But I also
Yeah.
think this is just an idea, and I'm not going to take us into another rabbit hole, but the expression human-centric sort of, because if you're human-centric, you're not talking about the customer at all, but you just want to help somebody get their job done or improve their everyday life with the service that you provide or the product, then you don't even have to have customer in your strategy because it's going to be there, because it's going to be the desire to make the world a better place, if you may, right? I mean, it sounds like a cliche. So I think sometimes it may be a trap to try to build a culture around customer centricity because it's going to get misunderstood. I think it's more about what kind of company do we want to be? What kind of people do we want to be? And how do we want to affect the people that interact with us? Just simplifying it. I don't know, but it's just.
We've done some incredibly interesting work over the last 3 years with the Norwegian police.
Yes.
My colleague Anders, that you know, and
Yes.
and Roger, who's a public service expert here. And it's fascinating that we're talking about citizen orientation. And what does it mean? It doesn't mean that the police should just go out and be nice to everyone. Because
Excuse me, can I arrest you?
Yeah, because they are actually the only institution to use violence towards citizens if needed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which they should. No, for them, it's much more about when we change and develop what we do, how do we integrate the citizen perspective in it? How do we listen and learn so that we develop the police to be a better place? And that's been fascinating and had full support by the police management in Norway, and it's been all over the country.
Yeah.
And now it's actually gone into the curriculum at the National Police School.
Wow.
Citizen centricity. How do you take the citizen perspective
I love that.
to developing the police to be a more effective organization, and of course an organization that retains the trust of citizens because they wholly depend on it to be allowed to use violence when needed.
Yeah, and it sort of wraps it up, right? What we talked about initially as well with the outside in perspective. It's just helping organizations or institutions understand the effect they have on the whoever is on the other end of the line. If we could just sort of state that, I think we would move the needle at least slightly to the right, sort of towards the right direction.
It's understanding the effect it has on the other end, but then the effect that has on the macro effect, because there's one thing to affect one citizen in the correct way, and if you affect the citizen in the correct way, the macro, and that's the design aspect, that's the thinking, okay, well, how that's what helps us make the right choices when we are not only thinking of the here and now, this one single interaction, but we're actually thinking about the greater impact that this single interaction would have. Now I'm going off on a much bigger thing.
No, but you're right. We should do another episode, Lavrans. I have one final question before we need to wrap it up. But I think from what we've talked about today and what we've learned from you today and also previously, I would really like to get your take on, no matter what your title is, your role, but you're in a company and you're trying to sort of to get going with something that can improve the customer or the user or the whoever's at the end of the line. You want to improve it, but you're struggling. Like, how would you go about it to secure the funding? And this is probably the question that people pay the most attention to, I think, because this is so crucial for so many people out there, especially who works within CX. So where do you start to sort of get the funding to start being customer-centric or even human-centric, if you may?
I'm not sure if I have anything original to bring to the table, but I think recognizing that when you ask for permission to spend resources, human, money, or time-wise, you should have both a business rationale, a customer rationale, and an employee rationale. And all three of them need to be there.
Yeah.
And then it'll vary. What's the important thing? Sometimes, you need to emphasize the business side of it. Sometimes, you need to emphasize the staff side of it. And sometimes you need to emphasize the customer part of it. But I think where, we fail sometimes because we just forget the obvious is that you need to talk about all three.
Yeah.
And how they all fit together.
I like that. Both the customer, the employee, and the business, not just the customer and the business. It brings more human into the mix. And I love human in the mix.
That was a great answer, Lavrans.
Right.
And we haven't had that answer before. That was concrete and practical, so thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
And I have to admit, being the one who just blurbs out stuff all the time, I'm left for once. I'm not often speechless, and I'm not entirely speechless today either. But my brain is just on fire right now. There's so many thoughts going on, and I think it's been such a inspiring conversation. I really hope we get the opportunity to sort of pick your brain more in the future. But for now, we're going to have to wrap it up. So once again, thank you for joining us, Lavrans. Joanna, it's always a pleasure to have you as my perfect co-host in this show. And I don't actually know who's the co-host and who's the co-host. I think we're both co-hosts, to be honest. But yeah. Anyway, to all the listeners out there, our users are sort of people at the end of the line. Hope you've enjoyed this really, really great episode that we've recorded here. You've been listening to the CXPod, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you for listening to the CXPod. If you want to reach us, you can always find us on LinkedIn, and please remember to follow us on Spotify and leave a review of what you think.